Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Shank. I'm the Executive Director of Georgetown Main Street. Thank you for joining us for the second session in our Summer Restaurant Workshop series. If you're new to our programming or the community, Georgetown Main Street is a nonprofit organization focused on supporting the small businesses along Wisconsin Avenue, from the waterfront up to Whitehaven Parkway. Our goal is to help local businesses thrive through technical assistance, marketing support, grant funding, and events that bring customers through your doors. This workshop is just one way we aim to provide tactical tools and expert insights to help you navigate the unique challenges and opportunities that come with running a restaurant, especially during the summer season. We're so glad to have you here and as part of a wonderful, vibrant restaurant scene in the DMV area. And I'm going to pass it over to Allison to share a little bit more about what you can expect from today's session.
Hi, everyone. I'm a board member at Georgetown Main Street. We love Rachel. She leads us really amazingly in our really vibrant Georgetown Main Street community. And so today, as she mentioned, is the second of three workshops that we're offering this summer. And we're really excited to pull together programming specific to restaurants. So today you're going to hear from Charissa Benjamin, who's the founder of Savor PR. And I'll let her do a more in-depth intro of herself and her company shortly here, but she's going to talk about some PR kind of 101 and some really practical applications that you can do to your business. And just a little bit of kind of the housekeeping in the run of show. That'll be about like a 30, 45 minute, very casual presentation. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A tab. So we'll be accepting questions. They're definitely encouraged and welcome. So please feel free to type them in there. And we'll either answer those as they come in or we'll dedicate a decent portion at the end to make sure that we get all your questions answered. And as well, just for everyone's awareness, I think several of you have been on before, but you are muted. We can't see you. You should be able to see Charissa's presentation screen here when we get started. So just raise your hand if anyone's having any issues with that. And then the recording as a follow-up will be hosted on our YouTube channel with Georgetown Main Street, and there will be a follow-up email sent out to attendees as well with Charissa's contact information should you choose to kind of reach out to her in the future. So without further ado, and I'm getting sirens in the background, I will turn it over to Charissa.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Allison and Rachel, and for having me on board. It's great to be here. As Allison and Rachel mentioned, and as the screen shows, my name is Charissa Benjamin. I'm the founder of Savor PR, and we have been operating in Washington, D.C. for almost 13 years now. October will be our 13th year, and we work mostly with chefs and restaurants and hospitality businesses here in the DC area, supporting with all of their PR and communications needs. So again, really happy to be here this morning and talk us through sort of a little bit of restaurant PR 101. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully I'm not technically challenged. I believe we can see everything. Allison and Rachel will chime in if not.
You're good. I see it.
Great, wonderful. Tech is not my strong suit. So always love to just sort of kick this off with like a little list of all of the different marketing communication strategies that restaurants and businesses can use when they're trying to communicate with the public and engage in marketing activities. Top of the list is obviously going to be what me and my team really focus on would be public and media relations. So very much a focus on communicating with the media and the public overall. And when we say media, that has certainly evolved over the years, where for a long time, a lot of that was sort of very traditional media. We have certainly incorporated a lot of new media strategies into how we communicate with different stakeholders that help to spread the word and share information about what you and your businesses are doing. So that is sort of the bread and butter of what we do. That does cross over a little bit into social media marketing, if you will. We don't do as much of that, but we do work very closely with a number of social media marketers who will help manage your social media presence, whether that is on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We can go into that a little bit later as well. But in terms of just really ensuring that you have a presence on all the social media platforms, and not just a presence, but you're able to be communicating with people and not just posting your content, but really engaging with folks as you have a smart and engaged social media presence. We also do not touch in paid advertising, but that is another strategy that many people do incorporate. It is something that tends to be on the pricier side, particularly for smaller independent restaurants. It is something that has to be done consistently and, over time, because if you just have one ad, it is out there in the ether. And if you want to have repetition and for people to really have a sense of who you are, and really, get a sense of the brand, then paid advertising is a very different route, but is something that is pricey over time. Email marketing, a lot of people are engaging a lot more in that these days, especially restaurants. This is not something that our team does engage with, but it is something that is very, very useful for restaurants, especially when you have an engaged dining public that comes in. So certainly, another form of communicating with your public. Direct mail is something that we are noticing is coming back into fashion, if you will. There's a lot of just oversaturation of email and digital marketing. And we are noticing that people who are engaged in direct mail are able to reach out and have a bit more of an impact with people, because we don't get mail as much anymore, but we do get a ton of email newsletters. And so if you are considering something where you can help stand out a little bit more with potential customers, direct mail is something that we are noticing is a bit more effective these days. And then there's, of course, SEO and paid search, which is not anything that is new, and it is something that is evolving with the increase of AI. And so we are seeing that it is becoming a little bit less effective, but it is yet again another tool that people use in the restaurant industry for marketing. But I do, though, like to go into sort of a very textbook explanation of what PR is. As I like to say, there are a lot of people that just don't always understand what PR is exactly. I laughed with Allison and Rachel when I shared this, but I'm like, my mother, I've been doing this for over 20 years. She still doesn't get what I do. So it's I'd like to read through this very textbook example of what that is. So every brand has a story to tell, but without a thoughtful and compelling public relations strategy, that story may never reach your audience. PR helps brands authentically connect with their audience, increase visibility, and elevate credibility with their target demographic. Customers see businesses as being more trustworthy and reliable if the media brings attention to you in a positive manner. So that's where we kind of break down, again, the real difference, because there's so much confusion between what is advertising and what is public relations. And PR is really what we feel strongly is where most restaurants do need to go. Advertising is paid. Public relations is something that you have to work towards. You have to earn it. We have to work to build trust with the media, with our public. And, a lot of those efforts really do lend themselves to validation. Which is not necessarily the same when you're paying for an ad and you're saying, hey, come to my restaurant. I paid to place this here. And you are, of course, that's what I'm going to say in my ad, right? But when you do have a story that has been placed or written about you in a publication, on TV, on the radio, it really does give that validation. And it helps people feel like, hey, I did hear about this. This writer said that this was a great restaurant to go visit, or it was included on this list. I'm going to trust that more than I am going to trust an ad where I was paid to tell you to share this message. The other thing with PR though is that it is a little bit tricky because there is no guarantee that all of your efforts are going to necessarily uh, end up with a placed story. So as I always like to explain to clients, we work very hard to be thoughtful about the kinds of stories that we're helping to share about you, but it does not necessarily mean that we are, going to be on the cover of a newspaper. That's just never, nothing that we can control or ever guarantee. And if anybody tells you that they can, that's not true. um, and then, we do, as I said a little bit earlier, advertising is expensive. If in order for it to be effective, you do have to do it consistently. PR is a much less expensive option when you compare it to advertising and just pouring money into, every month we're going to place XYZ ad. PR is, there's a lot more effort that goes into that, but it is certainly a much less expensive option when it comes to comparing the two, which I think a lot of people do sort of consider. So that is our background. And then again, in terms of benefits of earned media, we talk a lot again about that credibility, right? So 92% of consumers say that they trust earned media over advertising. I think that that's sort of a given, but I guess not everybody realizes that, but it is a lot more credible for your brand when you are consistently placed in media, whether that is in TV on these, interesting lists of best places to eat in Georgetown, or the Eater 38 map, or Washingtonian's 100 best lists. It does certainly help to increase awareness. It improves SEO, which I think I mentioned a little bit earlier. With the increase of AI, we are noticing that a lot of these bots, when they are giving search results, are pulling from recent and past news media to help come up with answers. So when you're searching for where are the best places for me to eat in Georgetown or in DuPont Circle, sure, they may pull up a news article, but if you've noticed on Google recently, when there is sort of a AI response that creates here as sort of a list, they are pulling from a lot of news sources. So that is something that that has been very helpful. As AI, we like it or not, it is taking over and is taking a larger place in our lives at this moment. So and again, goes back to the evergreen as well, right? Like this lives on. It is here. It is, if you search for a news article, there oftentimes, especially when things are online, it's going to be there for, you can go back and see stories that have been there for, the past 2 years, 3 years. Some of it may not always be as current, but it does help to build that brand awareness over time. And we always like to say in the PR world that there's a great snowball effect. If you get a great mention or great inclusion in print or online, a lot of the times that lends itself to the interest of TV and radio news producers, where they'll say, hey, the Michelin guide just came out. We want to go check out some of these new spots that have been included in the guide because we read about it in this publication. Or if there is, a specific trend where an example would be, I'm going to get to some of this a little bit further on, right? But if the Commanders are doing really well and your restaurant has come up with a really interesting Commander special that they've put on the menu, that, a TV news producer, as they flip through Eater or they flip through the food section of the Post, they think, oh, I heard about this, I read about this there, let's contact the restaurant and we're going to maybe do a TV segment. So definitely a snowball effect. And with that comes, again, the increased opportunity of just really reaching more customers, more potential investors, especially if you get a great placement in the places where some of these investors are reading, right? So I mentioned in the Washington Business Journal, as opposed to your more traditional consumer publications, and just overall a lot more media potential, because media, they're also reading the other publications. They're reading their competitors. They are also reading the publications of not necessarily their competitors, but the industries that they would like to cover and are interested in doing so. So that's just sort of a little background on on PR and the real strong value and effects of it. We're going to go through a little bit more about sort of how you can quote unquote bootstrap your own PR in the effect in the instance where you may not be working with an agency, or you may not have the budget to do so. Here are some of the tips and tricks of what you can and should be doing to really help build a little bit more of a thoughtful PR campaign. So these are some of the basic things that we like to really tell people that, from a toolbox perspective, there are some things that we have to say, you have to get your PR house in order so that you can do a lot more effective outreach. So one of the first things that we always recommend is to get a really compelling bio. And that is really working very thoughtfully to drill down what is your messaging. Who am I? What is my restaurant? What am I offering? And what is my story that I can help share with people? We are in a world where human interaction is really important. I will say from my personal experience of running PR campaigns, the public wants to know more about the people who are behind a business, especially when it is a small business. And I think especially now people want to support more small businesses, and they want to ensure that the people and the community that is behind a specific brand or business, that they want to know more about them. So really get a compelling bio. If you can, I'm going to get into some tips about how you do that a little further on, but if you have a bio, great. If not, get one written. A lot of people do not feel comfortable with talking about themselves. I personally don't love talking about myself. I love doing this for other people. See if you can get someone else to support you doing that. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member who can really help you pinpoint some of those like really great, compelling points about yourself and about your business. But it's an important tool to have, because once you do start getting more people interested in writing about you, you want to be able to share some basic background so that they get the information accurately. The second point that we cannot underscore enough is to invest in really good photography. Photographers are expensive. I understand that. If you can put aside some budget for a good food photographer, they don't have to come in every month, every other month, but even if you can find some budget to have a smart, good photographer come in, maybe it's once a year. Start off with that if you can get up to twice or once a quarter, but really have some solid photography with a mixture of your food and of your space, but really of your food and what you are offering, food, drink, whatever is on your menu that you are selling. But it is really important to have that ready and available. And I say that from the perspective that you may not, if you have a PR team, if you start sort of communicating with the media and sharing information about a specific promotion, it's always great to have photography in addition to sort of to share with that. But oftentimes you are going to get people coming to you saying, hey, I'm the photo editor from XYZ publication, or I'm really searching for a photo of tomatoes because it's tomato season right now and we want like beautiful gazpacho and whatever it might be. You are going to have some things at the ready, and the more beautiful the photo, the better opportunity and chance you have for really having that nice lead photo with the story once it runs. As I always like to say, people don't read anymore, sadly, but they are going to be drawn by a beautiful image. The next thing that you are really going to make sure that you have is a smart boilerplate. And that is really the who, what, the where. Who are we? What do we offer? Where are we located? The basic information. Whenever you read Tom Sietsema's weekly chat with the Washington Post, I feel like at least once a week somebody's complaining about why don't restaurants have their website information accurately? I just want the basics. I want to know where I can find them, what time are they opened, etc., etc., etc. So make sure that we have the basic 411 on who you are, what you're offering, and where you're located. And that's also going to include your website, your social media, all of the ways that people can find you. So not just online, but also offline as well. And then from a responsiveness accessibility perspective, this is one of the things that we always try to underscore with clients and understanding where they are and what they do. We are always online, right? Like this is our job as PR people, is to, be available, be accessible. If we are there as a representative for our clients and somebody's on deadline and they need to be able to, speak with somebody, interview with someone, get a photo, get access to whatever it is that they need, because let's face it, people are on deadlines and they don't really care about, if you are, I don't know, stuck in the kitchen at that moment. They simply don't. And that is unfortunate, but you need to be able to pinpoint someone who can be responsive and who is accessible so that they can respond and get them what they need in a moment, right? So it's so important to we always say being timely is really, really crucial as well. Because you may have a journalist who's working on a story and they have a list of 10 sources and they're going to go to them, they'll blast out an email and they'll say, hey, I'm working on this story. Do you have any examples of what you can share with me that you are doing? So whether that is a command or a special, or we're working on a story about, I don't know, tariffs and how it's impacting our restaurant at this moment, right? But you are going to have to respond as quickly as possible or have someone who can, because I guarantee you there are 2 or 3 other people on that list who will respond and they will do it maybe faster than you will, and they're going to have enough for their sources. And then you miss the opportunity of being included. So really important to be able to have someone who can speak and respond as fast as possible. Okay, so I talked through sort of like the real key things that you need to have in your toolbox and how do you sort of get your PR house in order. So I wanted to highlight, just as we broke down those pieces of what you truly need. If you are going to bootstrap some of these things, how can you get started on writing your bio, writing your fact sheet, and sort of having your information ready to go. So for a bio, I mean, I will say, listen, if you enjoy writing and you have the time to write something, get started on it. I am going to admit I don't love using AI and Chat GPT from that perspective, because I feel oftentimes the language is very obviously written by a robot. But I write so much for a living that I feel like I probably pick up on some of these things a little bit more. And I will also say that a lot of journalists, traditional journalists, will as well. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't use it as a tool. If it is something that you have access to, use it as a start. Use it to help lay out what a bio can look like. Take your resume or take something that may have been written before and try it, right? Like you can keep putting it into the system and having it refine it and get better. But what you really want to make sure you include in the end, these are sort of the top points that we always want to make sure are included. Be descriptive. Be really, really descriptive, but get to the point, which I know sounds counterintuitive. But you want to be able to tell your story in a way that draws people in. You give them enough information, but again, people don't love to read, right? So like honestly, a bio should be no longer than 1 page, and just a couple paragraphs, honestly, it can really do the trick. You want to make sure that you include your accolades and your milestones. Again, we don't always love to show off and boast, but listen, if you have done great things, which many of us have, and I think a lot of us don't realize it because we have to step away from it or have other people tell us these things, find out your accolades. What are you proud of your accomplishments? And make sure that those are included in your bio. Any major milestones in terms of, a university that you went to or a culinary program that you finished, making sure that those are included when you opened up a certain restaurant, or if you had worked at locations in the past that are going to add to your credibility and show, hey, this person has really done great things in this field and we think that they are, they're the bee's knees, right? So hype yourself up in your bio. And then we always think it's fun to end with a little personality, right? So show that you are a human who is not just, yes, this is a bio about your professional world. If there's a line or two that you feel personally comfortable with sharing at the end, we always think it's a nice add-on, right? Share a little personality. If you have any fun or interesting hobbies, I don't know, you played the violin as a kid, or you run marathons while juggling. If there's anything that is interesting that you'd like to include, do that, but only where you feel comfortable. For the fact sheet, this is, I think sometimes it takes a little bit longer to pull some of these things together, but once you have them done, they're ready. And whenever you get a media inquiry or somebody who is writing about you, you can share this and just have it ready. It may need some updating occasionally, but they're the basic things that you want to include about your restaurant or your location. We always include a section that talks about the style of food or the restaurant concept, quote unquote, and what it is that you're offering specifically. The basics in terms of the date of when you were founded, the number of locations you may have, and obviously where your location is. That's really important because, again, people just want the basic facts, right? Who is the chef, who is the owner, or sort of the personality or spokesperson that you want to have affiliated with your location. And then really the social media and website information. I did not include this here, and I don't know how I didn't, but that's also going to be something that will change for some people, but your hours of operation are also really important. And then going to photography, again, I am not a professional photographer, and I am very much of the opinion that professionals should be hired to do the things, especially when you don't have the expertise to do so. I do think, however, that smartphones and cameras have certainly gotten much, much better at capturing photos that can be used in situations for media, and you should use those tools when you can. So again, if you can't hire a photographer, which again I recommend that you should if you can, some tips are to really, really love the natural light. I can't tell you the amount of times that we've worked with a chef or a restaurant, and I was like, okay, we need a picture of something, and whatever that dish may be, they'll shoot it on the pass. And I'm like, why is this terrible, like bright reflecting light from the aluminum? Just, it's not a good look. It is, just make natural light your friend. Take a dish outside, take a cocktail outside, take a beautiful baguette, whatever it might be. Take it out into either outside or by a window. Really, really important. And then also to really know your angles, right? Like overheads are often great. Sometimes they are overused. So try and vary them, play with them a little bit. Use your perspective to see, hey, what's going to show off this dish in the most flattering way. When possible, definitely use props. It's going to diversify the shot overall. So if it's going to be ingredients that are in the dish, whether you have, keep talking about tomatoes because it's tomato season, right? But like if you've got, a beautiful delivery of heirloom tomatoes that have come, if you have that in a dish, great. But if they're, if you have some props to add into that, it's always a nice addition. Include a glass of wine or beer. And oftentimes, Allison will probably agree with this from a design perspective, because I feel it's a rule that I've heard a lot, right? But like to cluster in threes, try and play around with that, because that's usually a good rule for some food chats as well, right? So a dish, a glass or a drink of whatever it may be, and a napkin or a utensil that might be used to consume whatever is on the dish. And then don't be afraid to use a good photo editing app. There are a lot of them that are out there that you can research. Some are free, others are not as expensive. But again, we're not professionals, right? So if we can use a good editing app to help something maybe not look overly saturated or sort of soften the light a little bit, play around and see what you can find that would be effective. So moving on to the next section where we talk about how to interact with media. So again, if you are not using an agency or an in-house person to help build a PR campaign? What are some of the things that you can do to communicate with the media and be in touch with them so that you can let them know and be aware of what you're doing at your location, right? So we always start off with build a short list of media, right? Like, this is Washington, D.C. There are a lot of media who live and operate in this town. Lots of TV, lots of radio, lots of food people, magazines, newspapers. There are a ton of people that you can interact with. You do not need to be in touch with all of them. You need to be smart about who you would like to be in touch with. So start off with a short list of people that you can build internally. The internet world is your oyster. You can find most people's contact information, and if not, reach out to them. Reach out to them on social media. Say, hey, I am XYZ from this restaurant. I run a coffee shop or a bakery or whatever it may be, and I'd love to be in touch with you with some occasional updates about what we're doing at our location. Right? So do that, build that short list, and then start communicating with them, right? But what we always want to tell people is really to think about why you are interacting with them. And these are some really important questions that you can ask yourself, which I know can be very hard because we're so close to the work that we do, and we are all very proud of the work that we do, and we think everybody should know about it. But not everyone else feels that way. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of a journalist who is receiving information and pictures from lots of different restaurants and businesses who want to be written about as well. So always really stop and ask yourself, why should this person care about what I am reaching out to them with? And I know it's a tough question to answer, but why should they care? And most importantly, why should their readers care? Because that is who they are in service to as writers. So they want to write stories that are interesting, that are compelling, and that their readers are going to be curious about. And so when you do that, think through that process, which is really, really challenging, but so, so important, because if you can really remove yourself from what you're so close to every day, you can think a little bit differently about, oh, maybe what I am doing is interesting because, sure, there are other people who are doing it, but I'm doing it differently because I am putting my own personal spin on this that is something to do with, I don't know, maybe it is the country that I was raised in, or the way, the technique that my mother taught me to do something, which is very different from how other people do this, but this is a unique way that makes it special in its own right. So really think about what's going to set you apart from what the others are doing. And what do you do differently that you want to be known for? Because there are a lot of people that are in business and in food service, and it's hard work. We all know it's very, very hard work. But what are you doing that is truly different and that does set you apart? And so really important to think about that piece, so that it helps you to stand out when you're reaching out to folks. I can't see if there are any questions. Oopsie, let's go back here 1 second.
No open questions yet, so we're good.
Great.
But as a reminder to everybody, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen.
Great. Thanks, Allison. I talked a lot about media. I wanted to make sure that I shared some space for influencers and content creators. I will say that, this world has definitely exploded over the years, and my personal background has been very much in traditional media relations, and I have seen the world of influencers and content creators grow and explode and be a really, really vital and important community for restaurants and for public relations professionals to be engaging with. And as new media explodes and evolves, we definitely want to make sure that we have a presence with being there. And so I want to talk a little bit about how some best practices that we have observed when it comes to engaging with influencers and content creators. And so this can look this can come in one of two ways, right? Like you can be the one who is proactively reaching out to an influencer, much like in the media, traditional media world, or you could have an influencer or content creator coming to your restaurant and asking to collaborate and work with you. And so, regardless of how the opportunity comes to you, we do think it's really important to do a few things before you decide to engage with someone. And one thing that's really important is to educate yourself about this influencer. Go to their pages, go and see what their content looks like. Have a look at, what are the other restaurants that they've visited recently? What are the kinds of what do their images look like? What do their reels look like? Is this a kind of style of image or video that we think sort of fits the look and feel of our brand? And really take a look at their engagement. Are people commenting? Is it just a photo that sits there with a handful of likes? Or, are people commenting on them? What does the engagement look like? Who is commenting on them? Does it look like just, their mom and dad is going to them and hitting like that this looks great? Or is it people saying, oh my gosh, I really wanted to go to this place. Did you try the eggs benedict? Like, I've been hearing a lot about it. Like, what does that engagement look like? And it doesn't take that much time, but just scroll a little bit, look at some of their posts, and really get a sense of what their content and engagement looks like. It's a really, really important thing to do. So you can get a feel for, is this somebody that we want to partner with? Is this a good a good barometer for our business? Because ultimately, when you take a look at what their engagement looks like and the kinds of content that they're creating, that is going to lend itself to the kinds of people that you're going to see coming into your restaurant as well. And I say that because sometimes, a restaurant may want to engage with a younger demographic or an older demographic, or, see more families coming in. So does that, you know, are you seeing a lot more of a lot more of that content that is aligned with the kind of demographic that you want to see coming into your restaurant a little bit more, because you think, hey, this is a great destination for families and we wish more families knew about us. And so trying to find where those people are is really important. One thing that we can't underscore enough is to be really, really clear about what your collaboration or your offer is going to look like, and do it in advance. So some of these creators and influencers, they will charge, and you're going to want to know that in advance, right? So what do your rates look like? And what does that get me, right? Like, does that mean, I am paying you X number of dollars, but you're also coming in and you're having a free meal? I'm going to get to the free meal piece afterwards. But you're coming in for a free meal, and I'm also paying you X amount of money for a reel, for a static post, for an Instagram story, for a TikTok video. Understanding what that looks like is really important in advance. And I want to talk about what the free meal looks like as well, because that's also really important. We always want to make sure that we work with our clients with whatever content creator is coming in, whether they have asked or we have invited them in. What does the offer look like? And that means we're going to give you a comped experience up to X number of dollars. We're going to cover your meal up to $200, or we're going to cover your meal. You can come in, you get to bring one friend, two friends, four friends, however many that is, whatever you feel comfortable with. That has to be very clear in advance. Not only just the dollar number, but if it's a dollar amount, it's a dollar amount. Bring 10 people. But if I'm telling you that you can only spend $500, that's how much I'm covering, bring however many people, but you are responsible for after this amount. Or it is, I am going to give you 2 cocktails, 1 appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. But that has to be really clear in advance. And if it's not, then you run into issues, because there's so many people involved. If you're a more full service restaurant, that's obviously going to look different, right? But does your server understand that this is what was agreed to in advance? And you just want to make sure that there are no gray areas when you go into that. And when you're hosting these people, we always want to make sure that you're giving them good content, giving them good opportunities to create good content, right? So make sure that, they are, if they're not ordering a dish that you think is going to photograph really well or be really effective and beautiful on social media, send one out on the house, because you want to make sure that, hey, this is probably one of the sleeper hits that they're not realizing. So if you have an opportunity for them being there, then send that out and give them a chance to see what that dish can look like and taste like. And you never know, maybe it'll make its way into the content that they're going to create in the end. And we always want to remind our clients to hold a table for them where there's good natural light. Uh, that is really, really important for them for the content that they're creating, going back to that natural light point for photography. And I mentioned a little bit earlier. And, last point is always solicit feedback about the experience. We think this piece is really important, just because it's candid. You get to hear what went well, what didn't work as well. And oftentimes you're not even getting negative feedback, but I think a lot of what we do get and hear is pretty constructive. And I think you'll find that you'll be very, more surprised in a good way than not when it comes to getting feedback from content creators, because I think in the end many of them do want they want a business to succeed, they want to help with success, and giving that feedback is going to be really helpful for you and for them.
Charissa, if you don't mind, we do have a question relevant to this. So Emily is asking, how do you identify journalists or publications or influencers who might be a good fit for your content?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I feel like we have been doing this for so long that we naturally are just sort of on top of, you know, who is doing new and interesting content, and, what reporter is now working at Washingtonian for the year. So I do think a couple things. When it comes to media, definitely scrolling through the different food sections or areas where you do want to try and get something placed is really important, so that you can read the bylines and see, hey, okay, well, it looks like this person has been writing a little bit more consistently or contributing to more of these roundups on, best coffee shops in Shaw or whatever it might be. So kind of getting a sense of the types of stories that they're writing. So I would say that would be one way on the media side of things. When it comes to content creators, we do this a little differently, because to be honest, like, there are a lot that are popping up that I was like, oh gosh, I didn't know about you, or this is the first time I've heard about you. And certainly there are some who have been on the scene for much longer, who have a bigger following, and so a lot more of those names. But I don't always love to say the micro influencers, but yeah, the ones with a smaller following who may not be in the 6 digits or over 1 million. To me, I find are also really, really important and effective. So we do that a couple of ways, right? Like, we look and see, for instance, if there is like a really big, if there is an influencer who has a really big following, oftentimes, like, they are getting people who are also on the influencer scene who are either commenting or engaging with them. So taking a look at who is saying stuff on their on their posts, and clicking through, and almost kind of like going down the proverbial like social media rabbit hole, if you will, right? Where you are sort of taking a look, is that snowball effect, who's commenting, who's following them. So that's one piece. Sometimes it's also going to a competitor's restaurant, right? Going to their page and seeing, okay, go to their tagged posts and seeing what influencers are going into this location. Or even if it's not a competitor, it may be sort of, a new hot restaurant that's in town, and all of the influencers are going there because they want to go check it out. So go to that restaurant's page and see, oh, who's the influencer who's going here, and sort of building out your list that way. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about trend watching and staying relevant. Um, this, we often say when potential clients come to us, it's usually for one of two reasons. One is that they're opening, they're new, they want some support, they want to build their brand awareness. And as I always like to say, those are the easy projects to work on. They're, I mean, not easy from the perspective that, like, yes, it's a lot of work to open up a restaurant, but it's easy from a press perspective because everybody wants to write about somewhere that is new. The second type of client that we always get coming to us is, hey, we're not so new anymore. We have been around for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. We're not the new kid on the block anymore. We want someone to help us stay relevant and help us be a part of the conversation, not forget us, which we think is really important, especially at a time when we're hearing a lot of sad news about restaurants that have been mainstays that are closing, right? Like, someone said the other day, it's like, people tend to write about restaurants only when they open and only when they close, which is unfortunate. Like, we should be finding ways to support our small businesses and our restaurants at all times, not just the good and not just the sad endings. And so this is where we feel that, like, trend watching and staying relevant so that we can be part of conversations is really, really important. And so I've, thrown up a couple of headlines and examples of ways that we have seen some of our clients and others do this, where they can really be a part of what is happening in that moment, which is why trend watching is something that we think is super important for us to stay on top of, and for all restaurants, right? Like, we don't have a lot of time to be doing this, but why it is important to sit down for, 20 minutes a week and really just sort of peruse the headlines of different sections or different publications, especially those where you do want to make sure that you are being part of a conversation within, right? And so, some examples here of, this is a Washingtonian headline of, I guess, how do we turn lemons into lemonade, right? But we did see a number of area businesses earlier this year offering specials and deals to federal workers and contractors who had been laid off. And so this was, we had seen several headlines like this and had heard through the grapevine from many businesses that, yes, okay, people may have been coming to take advantage of some of those deals, but, like, overall, it was just a great thing to do in the community to help build awareness, but to let people in our neighborhoods know that they were being supported. Mentioned, for instance, the example of the Commanders. They had a great season last year. And so we did see some restaurants who were very quick and they got on top of it, and we're going to start, doing specials for supporting our hometown team that hasn't necessarily had the best history with recent history, if you will, of doing well at football. And I don't get the sports, but I understood that everybody was having a moment, right? So it was a good way to be a part of that conversation. The pandas, right? Like, that was a big deal when they left the city. And then once we got the news that they came back, it was pandemonium. And so you saw a lot of area restaurants, you saw hotels, you had bars, they were doing, fun cocktails. They were doing, come and have a panda stay at our hotel and you'd get a panda stuffed animal and a welcome cocktail. And so really finding ways to stay part of that conversation. A couple of other examples that I've thrown on here. We love a sort of pop culture moment, right? So Game of Thrones, obviously not new anymore, but an example of a show with a big cult following. And, yeah, a lot of restaurants kind of jumped on the bandwagon and were like, what are we going to do that sort of taps into, Game of Thrones fever, if you will. So, we do like to have a look at what are some of the big movies that are coming out. What are some of the exciting TV shows that may be having their season finales or their series finales that you might want to tap into to do something around that. And so that's, I think from a pop culture perspective, that's always one. Alice, and this is a little bit of an older headline, so you might be like, oh, what do you mean the fresh design is feminine? That's not even a trend anymore. But I feel like you certainly get from a design perspective, and this is probably a little bit more relevant to your newer restaurants that are opening up, right? But are there trends that you might be noticing from not just a design perspective, but we worked, for instance, on a story where Ita was writing about about not just restaurant bar hooks, but what are interesting ways that restaurants and bars are helping people with their handbags, which was the most, you know, to me, I was like, oh, that's a really interesting story, but like I never even thought about that. And then I realized that all of these restaurants are doing like weird and wacky things so that women don't have to put their handbags on the floor. So again, just sort of what are some of these interesting trends that we are hearing that we can either try and tap into or build something around? Um, so that was my presentation, particularly, the end part was all about trend watching and staying relevant, which I don't know who all is on our call. My presumption is it's probably not a restaurant that is opening up next week or next month, because you're probably busy opening up a restaurant, so you don't necessarily have time to be on this call right now. But I think for the restaurants that are looking for what are ways that we can stay relevant and be part of a conversation or come up with an interesting promotion, I wanted to sort of leave you with a little bit of I don't want to call it homework, but almost like a little activity. So before I started Savor PR, I was in-house managing PR for Kimpton and Hotels and Restaurants, but on their restaurant division. And an activity that we always used to do that we found really, really helpful and interesting, and also helpful for us as PR practitioners. And so, something that even my team and I do up until today is how do we get creative and come up with our own promotions that are going to be successful? And so, what we would do is we would look at different sections of the newspaper, online or in print. So that's what I want to leave you with, to sort of take some time, go through the Post, the New York Times, whatever you might read, whether it's a magazine or a newspaper. But I want you to look at a news organization that has more that is not niche. I don't want you to go to a food publication. Sure, you can look at one of those for some inspiration, but go to a general news publication and look through the different sections. Don't limit yourself to food and to style, and look at the headlines and look at the news stories and use that as inspiration for you to think through what is an interesting or compelling promotion that we could maybe come up with that might help us, create a promotion that would really be successful. And the reason I tell you not to look at just the food section, you could look at the sports section and say, hey, you could be like me, not follow football and be like, oh, the Commanders are doing well. I bet you that people in the city are going to be really into this, right? So perhaps we might want to come up with something that feels in line with or on brand with who we are, but also becomes part of this conversation that we can tap into. I realize that this format may not be as easy for us to engage and talk through what could and couldn't work well. But I invite you to do that. And I've shared my contact information. It would be great if you wanted to come up with a quick who, what, how, and why, right? Like, what would I come up with based on this news, on this headline that I've just read? And email me. I am very happy to give feedback and share, what you could do differently or what you could add to it to really make it something that is successful. Because it truly makes me, when I think about restaurant coverage in our city, it feels very limited just to who's opening and who's closing. And I feel like we're all in this industry really, really creative. We're so passionate, and I feel like there is so much that we are doing and that we can be doing to really be part of a conversation and give the community reasons to continue supporting the hard work that so many of you are doing. So I think that is the end of my presentation. I will leave you with oh, what's happening here? Ah, yes. There we go. My final thoughts. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes that are PR related from a famous person or two. And I really leave that with you because I do feel really passionately and strongly about the importance and the impact of PR. There are often times I'm like, is AI coming for PR? Maybe, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, like relationships matter a lot. And I think that having really a smart and thoughtful PR campaign and strategy is really important to businesses. And so, Richard Branson, one of my favorite quotes is publicity is absolutely critical. A good PR story is infinitely more effective than a front page ad. So going back to my earlier point, Oscar Wilde, there's only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about, especially when you're closing. And then if I was down to my last dollar, I would spend it on public relations. So I will leave with those final quotes, if you will. But I don't know if there are any other questions that have popped up in the chat. It seems like there may have.
Yes, thank you, Charissa. And just reminding people to please, if you have any other questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A. We've gotten one from Monica, which is, I guess, not necessarily related to PR, but she's asking, in your experience lately, Charissa, anecdotally, have you been hearing from your clients about business slowing in response to DOGE or other, political situation in DC? And if so, like, how are you guys helping them to counteract that through PR potentially?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I will say it's a tough time to determine exactly what the impact of everything that's been happening is because it's also summer, right? So restaurants are traditionally slower in the summer. And so some of my clients who are noticing a slowdown are trying to figure out, okay, what is the reason? Is it just that it's summer, or is it that these are the impacts of the layoffs? I think a lot of people feel like they're going to have a better sense by September or October. I will say that as one caveat. We also have other clients that are still doing very well and are busy, but I will also preface that with saying that a lot of our clients do tend to be on the either fast casual or the more casual side. And so I feel like those concepts in general are less affected because, they are cheaper restaurants, right? So for those who may be more price sensitive, we're not seeing as much of that. I am hearing, from some clients that they're seeing less people drinking. So alcohol sales do tend to be down uh in some instances, and then in others I'm hearing more. So again, hard to tell. I think from how we are helping our clients, counteract some of that is we are trying to be a lot more thoughtful about I I'm careful to say value driven promotions, but really value driven promotions, right? Like now is not the time to unveil your caviar and champagne promotion, right? So it is more affordable happy hours or more thoughtful promotions or campaigns around, wine nights on Wednesdays where you might try to drive a bit more business and add a little bit more value, if you will. But it is being thoughtful about the price sensitivities that we think a lot of people in the DC area are probably thinking through right now. So I would say that is certainly one thing. And I think the other is really staying very close to understanding what may be impacting some of those trends and working to communicate that with journalists, because we do think that that is something that many writers on the food scene want to hear about. They do want to know, okay, so how are you being impacted by tariffs? Because there's so many ways that people don't think about this, right? Like, people who may have more Brazilian coffee, which is going to see a 50% tariff, as opposed to coffee coming from Ecuador, which may be seeing a lower percentage point. Does that mean that we're going to start shifting where we're sourcing our coffee from? And those, I think, are really interesting trends and tidbits to hear and to communicate with journalists, because they do want to hear those things.
Amazing. That was a great answer. Thank you, Charissa. And then if there were kind of like any publications in DC that you think restaurants and food and beverage businesses should be looking to, like if there's like a hit list, like the big ones, is it Washington Post, Washingtonian, Eater? Like, could you weigh in on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, they're the big ones. There's Washington Post, there's Eater, there's Washingtonian. So those are certainly your big ones. I would say definitely don't overlook the smaller publications, especially those that have a bigger newsletter following as well. So Axios DC is really top of the list for us as well. Anna Spiegel, who oversees a lot of their food coverage, came from Washingtonian as well. They have a pretty strong subscriber base, so we would certainly say that Axios is top of the list for us as well. Hey DC is a newsletter that comes out every morning as well, and they have an accompanying podcast that is also great. So we would say the newsletters are big ones, and I always say that, TV. DC is not a big TV town like Baltimore is, like a local TV, but we still have a lot of great local TV opportunities here, and people still tune in, surprisingly. So I wouldn't forget the TV stations, and also from a radio perspective, WTOP is a big one, and I wouldn't forget Nikki Nellis and the List Are You On It. She has a really, really big following and covers the food industry intensely and has a weekly radio show and a podcast. So definitely tapped in on the food side there. So I'd say those are some of the bigger ones.
That's great. And so now imagine, you're a food and beverage business and you have gotten the attention of a reporter. Um, and say you've never engaged in an interview before or a TV appearance or something. Are there some tips or some quick coaching that you would give to those clients about what to say, what not to say, how final is what you've told them? Do you get an opportunity to go back and say, hey, that's not what I meant,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like I could do an entirely different, presentation on media training. And so, I'll try and keep this as top line as possible. It's going to look different if it's going to be print as opposed to broadcast. So I'll tackle print first. The nice thing about print is that it's not live. And if you mess up and say something, you can say, hey, didn't mean to say that. When it's live TV, that's going to look different, right? So but always prepared to go into these things, right? Like you're not going to likely get a list of questions in advance. If someone sends those to you, great, wonderful if you can. It's rare, but if you do, wonderful. But think about what are some of these questions that this reporter might want to ask me, and I don't know what a specific topic might be. If it's a new opening, we can use that as an example, right? So like, tell me more about this restaurant concept. Why are you opening? Tell me a little bit more about your background, but think about what these potential questions might be. What would a writer want to know, right? And it's fine to ask them in advance, hey, what should I be prepared to talk about? Are there any specific areas or topics that you want us to talk through so I can come in prepared? They want you to give a good interview too, right? Like they want to make sure that they get the content that they need. So prepare for that. Think about what you want to say and really make sure that you hit the points that you want to get across so that you can prepare in advance and make sure. I always like to say nothing is ever off the record. So let's not forget that. So if you don't want anything to be shared, don't say it. That's a really, really important piece. But ultimately, right, like unless this is I can't imagine there are very few controversial stories that restaurants are going to be interviewed about, right? So if this is a general piece about your new restaurant or your promotion, no one's coming at you with, a negative line of questioning unless you're putting out a really controversial promotion, which I don't think many people are going to be doing. When it comes to TV or radio, know in advance, is this live or is it pre-recorded? But if it's pre-recorded, great. If you have a flub, you can maybe work on fixing some things. But again, be prepared for this, right? Understand in advance, how long is this TV interview going to be? Who am I interviewing with? And again, prepare. This may feel awkward for some people, but look at the mirror, turn on your timer on your phone, and practice delivering some quick liners, one-liners of tell me a little bit about your business. You want to be able to do that in like 20 seconds, right? So time yourself. Think about how do I thoughtfully do this? And then, you know, when it comes to TV, one of the things I always try to remind people, do not look at the camera. It's one of my biggest pet peeves, so I'll leave you with that one, right? Like the camera person, the photographer will be paying attention and they will help ensure that you are gonna look your best. You don't need to pay attention to that. Darting glances is what comes off on TV when you pay attention to a camera, so don't look at it. They're gonna make sure that you're shot well, so it's all good. And then I think you had said, Allison, there was one thing about how much do you get to go back and change what you said. Um, Listen, if there's something that after an interview has happened, particularly a print interview, and you think, hey, I wish I could have added this in, and it's within a reasonable time since you've had it and the story hasn't been filed, it is absolutely fine to go back and say, hey, I would love to, you know, I thought about this after our conversation. I'm gonna, you know, give you some more points here. And it's also one thing that sometimes comes up in an interview that we always try and tell clients, if you don't know the answer to something, you do not have to feel compelled just to say something. And you can be honest and say, hey, you know what? I'm actually not sure what the answer to this is. Give me a minute and I'll get back to you.
That's awesome. And then a question about press releases.
Yeah.
How critical do you think those are? Can clients kind of like, can you find a format for one and write it via AI? And like, when do you think one is necessary?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's sort of like the conversation that happens on an ongoing basis in our industry. Like, is the press release dead? Do we need to write them? Do we not need to write them? I still think a press release is really important. And I think that they are used less and less. And I think that is fine. They should be. They can sometimes be a little exhausting to write. And I think unless you have a huge amount of information to be sharing, that is probably the only time that a press release is ever um, eh, worthy of being written. Our team will only write them for a new opening. And I'm trying to think of the last time that we wrote one beyond that. I think that's really it. It's a new opening more than anything else. Or if there's a major campaign or promotion, and I feel like this is probably for like our more corporate clients, right? So like if you're going into, I don't know, for instance, like the holiday season and you have a huge lineup of events and promotions that you want to sort of announce as sort of one big package, then maybe, but typically it's really just for openings for us, and everything else we kind of just keep to top line pitches. Again, like there's information overload for people. And so you want to be really thoughtful about how you communicate and not give them too much information. But when it comes to a lot of information that needs to be communicated, like a new opening, then that's where it makes sense for a press release, right? Like you want to talk about, here's my new menu, here's what the design looks like, here's when we're going to be opened, you know, giving a quote, all those things that you want to make sure are included in that press release is going to be really important. Again, you know, I don't love AI. I said it a little bit earlier. I don't want to say that I don't love AI, but I don't love the quality of writing that I've seen come from a lot of these ChatGPT bots, but they are getting better. And so absolutely, yes, like use one. If you do not have someone who is able to write that for you, get that started. You know, I tested one a couple of times just to see what it spat out. It would certainly need a little bit of refining, but you want to just make sure from a template perspective, they'll get that right. The ChatGPT will get it right, but you want to make sure that what is communicated again is the who, the what, the where, the why, the when. Like give the people the things that they're going to want to know. And you should be good.
Amazing. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, but if anybody has any more, please type them in now. But otherwise, I think we will wrap up the session.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charissa. And to everybody else that is still on, wanted to give a quick reminder that we will have our third and final summer session 2 weeks from today. That's going to be by Harmony Group, and they're an accounting company that specializes in restaurants. So focusing on your profit and loss statement and using that as a strong tool to make really informed business decisions. So thank you again, Charissa, and we'll send a follow-up email out afterwards.
Wonderful. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.